The Longevity Lounge is proudly brought to you by AIA Australia, dedicated to helping Australians live healthier, longer, better lives. Welcome back to the Longevity Lounge with Guy Leach and the Professor Carl Treacher, where they explore what it really takes to live younger for longer. Today, they're joined by someone they consider one of the most knowledgeable minds in the world of supplementation, Paul Wigger. Guy believes in all the years he's spent in health and performance, he's never met anyone who understands the science of supplements and cellular aging as deeply as Paul. He's not just across what works and what doesn't, he knows the timing, the dosage, the interactions, and the why behind every capsule and compound. If you're serious about slowing down the aging process, boosting your cellular health, and cutting through the noise in the supplement world, this episode is a must listen.
So, Paul, welcome to the lounge.
Thanks for having us. Excited to be here with you and Guy.
Right, and it is great to have my guru in supplementation on the Longevity Lounge today so we can learn all things about this nature. So that's great. Yeah.
I think we're all really excited about this podcast because the whole area of supplements and supplementation has just been accelerating for the last couple of decades. We've got an influx and a plethora of information from various channels, social media telling us one thing, variety of means, AI now serving us things up in terms of aggregate information, which might be more interesting or more accurate, I should say. So we're fascinated to have you on the show to actually give us a sense of reality, a sense of truth. Now, but as we start, when we talk about supplements, can you take us back to the start? You know, we're taking pills, we're taking powders. What do we mean by supplements?
So supplements, obviously, when you look at the definition, they are additional to what should be standard. So, you know, our standard intakes are your healthy food, your water, your liquids, etc. Supplements are anything that we might be deficient in that we're taking externally. Really important for some people to know supplements aren't the be-all, end-all. You know, we need all the other things, or as much as we can with the other things on point, you know, your diet, your exercise, your sunlight, your grounding, and all that sort of thing. There's so many things we can do, but supplements are in addition to that, but in some cases, extremely beneficial and often necessary.
Well, how did you get started? What was the background and the interest for you?
Well, I love supplementation. So it was my favorite thing, just from the results I got from training at the gym. So got into a wrestle with my brother, my smaller twin brother, which he'd never been able to towel me up. And then all of a sudden we had a wrestle I couldn't pin in, and he'd hit the gym. And so it was my turn to hit the gym. That was back in 2004. Then I started taking supplements, and that's when I saw an amazing progress. So, you know, I put on 20 kilos of muscle. My bench press went up significantly. So that was gym-related supplements. I've come from a background in academia. I used to lecture about in commerce and found I didn't really enjoy it. I loved supplements. So I bought my first health food store in 2010 and then took that academia approach to all things, not just gym supplement related, but health supplement related, to learn the interactions in the body, what it actually does and what's beneficial. So I wasn't selling customers the wrong products or wasting their money, and was actually getting results, which would also be great for the shop as the shop would do well, but people would get results. And that's sort of how it happened. And it's been 15 years now. I haven't stopped the research. And in this field, especially sports supplementation, there is no course that you can do. You've got to research it and find it out for yourself. So that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years.
Well, let me start with the basic questions. You mentioned before that supplements are obviously in addition to your healthy diet. How does one person, how does our one listener ascertain what they need to take, what they need, whether the diet's adequate, what are the right supplements? Well, obviously in this conversation, we're going to get to the things that everyone wants to know. What are the supplements making the biggest difference for different things? That's going to be terrific. But let's just start with, how do you know what to take?
My first response would be, what are you looking to achieve? How are you feeling and what are you looking to achieve? So if you're coming to me and you say, look, I'm really tired, we've got supplementation for that, or I'm not getting a good sleep. Or if I'll ask a few questions, how are you feeling? How's your sleep? How are your energy levels? How are your mood? Good, good, good. What are you here for? Oh, look, I've heard about some anti-aging supplements, and I'm interested in longevity. Okay, so let's go down that road. So to find out what people need, they either need a clear message to actually say, look, this is what I'm looking to achieve, or we can dig down and find out what's most important to them based on the answers they give us from a lot of questions.
When I was growing up and, training a lot when I was younger, there was, there was the attitude that, oh, you should take vitamin C, you probably should take a multivitamin, and that was about it. And a lot of people would say, oh, if you're taking anything more, you're peeing it out, and you've just got expensive urine coming out the other end. I mean, has that changed over the years? Is that a different situation these days?
There's still some of that mentality around, but there's been a lot more education. So in particular with some multivitamins, a lot of them are water soluble, and that's why if you take too many of your B vitamins and other things, that you'll pee them out and the pee will be bright yellow. However, the vitamins that you are deficient in, the body will still absorb them. And peeing them out isn't doing any damage to the body. The body just eliminates them and there's no issues with that. So it's not about having a multivitamin and making sure that you're using every single thing in that multivitamin. You use what you need and then the body eliminates the rest. So it's a bit basic of their thinking to say, oh, look, you're just peeing it all out. It's a bit more complicated than that. And people are a lot more educated and they understand that a lot better now than they did, let's say, 10, 15 years ago.
As we age, is there a difference in absorption compared to when we were younger? Is there a change in the absorption, but also what supplements we should be taking? Like most of our listeners would be probably over the age of 40. Does that change as we get older?
The body will efficiently draw nutrients when it's in its available form as it needs to. Obviously, when we're younger, our systems are more efficient because the cells are younger. They haven't aged as much, and we can go into what aging actually is maybe a little bit later in this podcast. So you will get slightly better absorption if you're younger. However, that shouldn't stop anyone from maximizing the health benefits of taking these supplements like multivitamins and vitamin C if you're deficient, to get the benefits that these vitamins can give. Yeah.
So you've said a couple of times, if you're deficient, right? Are we assuming that this is predicated on a blood test or some sort of initial testing for you to ascertain what's required?
That will help. So you can get blood tests. You can also get genetic tests as well. So they're a bit more expensive, and they're a bit of a process, and they're not as easy. You can't just go to a doctor and get it. You'll have to find a specialist doctor or a naturopath, etc., and they can find out your genetic disposition. So some people, for me, for instance, I can't absorb vitamin D and convert and assimilate vitamin D as effectively through sunlight. So I would be a perfect candidate to actually take a vitamin D supplement. But someone else, on the other hand, might be able to assimilate that vitamin D, and the genetic test will tell them that. And then they would be advised, hey, if you're taking a vitamin D supplement, you probably don't need to, especially if they have a blood test to combine with it and see that their vitamin D levels are indeed high enough. If they weren't taking vitamin D and they were high enough, then that's, guaranteed that they're doing their jobs.
So here's what we're going to do. There's something for everyone on this podcast. So we're going to go to special diets, right? What you think people with special diets need. I'll come to that in a minute. Something for everyone, right? What should everyone be taking? Then we're going to talk about athletes and high performance. What's the things that you recommend? And then I'm going to give you a test and I'll talk about a couple of supplements and see why I may or may not be taking them. Are you up for that challenge?
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, sounds good.
I'll tell you what, we've put them under pressure.
Right. So I know Margaret in wherever she's from. We're from Mount Eliza. From Margaret, she's our listener. She's very interested in all of those things. She's a 65-year-old power walker. So let's start with just the specialized diets. We know that plant-based diet has certainly gained popularity. We know Mediterranean diet, very popular. For those people that have a vegetarian, vegan diet, what are they likely to be deficient in and what should they do?
So obviously, when they don't eat meat, they don't get as much protein in general. And I know that you can get vegan options for protein. So, tofu is a big one, has all your amino acids required, but you might do legumes, nuts, and you can even get really good vegan protein powders these days. But if you're not having a supplement, then protein is a bit of a struggle. And so supplementing with a healthy vegan-based, if you want to stick with vegan or vegetarian supplements, a healthy protein shake would be really good. And usually they would combine a organic rice protein with an organic pea protein. These would cross the amino acids over because in isolation they are deficient. These will cross the amino acids over to give a really good profile for a high biological value so the body can utilize those amino acids for its protein needs. Also, collagen can be a little bit of a struggle. Now, it's really important to explain that you can't consume collagen and get collagen per se. However, if you consume collagen from meat or collagen supplements, the body has typically the right ratio of amino acids to then work with what's called our fibroblasts in the body to convert those amino acids into collagen on the body. So you can't drink collagen and get collagen, but it does make it a bit easier to do that with the amino acid breakdown. So by getting some amino acids that will typically be deficient in a vegan diet would be really good. So one of those would be hydroxyproline. We find that is a really effective amino acid for vegetarians and vegans to take to increase their natural collagen production. Why is collagen production so important? Well, it makes up a lot of the tissue on the body. And if we're not producing enough collagen, the body can degrade, it recovers slower. Our skin can suffer increased wrinkles, which, people do care about, but also organs in the body, muscle tissue is made up a lot of collagen. So getting these things in can really make a big difference.
Just on that, so we said vegans and vegetarians. I think I'm not going to give you a score because I have no qualifications to assess whether you said anything useful or not, but it sounded pretty good to me. For someone who's been a vegan for 20 years, I tend to agree with what you say in terms of the protein struggle and the collagen struggle, but I'm all over that. The next question is for the athletes, the people who have a high performance mentality. Now, a lot of our listeners, largely because of Leechy and his background, are interested in high performance. Leechy and other podcasts has talked about mindset and workload. You made a point earlier of talking about genetic testing. We've got a relationship with Melbourne Functional Medicine that do that genetic testing, and Leechy and I are going through that at the moment, which will tell us, one, the basic markers, but two, we are sort of interested in the high performance consideration. But on supplements for athletes, what's the basics? Is there 3? Is there 5? Is there 10 things they should be doing? Tell us.
I always say there's a 3. There's a triangle. So when elite athletes train, whether it's training or game day, which Leechy would know on a Sunday, watched him over and over again back in the day. But that's when you see the body through strain that it's not actually designed to do. The body was meant to hunt a woolly mammoth, then sit down, relax, and eat, and then do it again. Or if you're from other areas in the world, forage for vegan materials, and then not put your body through large amounts of strain. The great thing is if we're putting our body through large amounts of strain, like Guy used to, we become better than we were ever supposed to be. So that's why Guy was ripped, muscular. That's not a normal look, right, Guy? That's
Still, thanks, Paul.
We're going to edit this podcast right here, and we'll start again.
So it's so people can become better than they ever were supposed to. However, the body doesn't naturally provide enough sustenance or create enough amino acids per se for that recovery. So we go down the road of a triangle for maximizing that recovery. And the pinnacle of that triangle is protein. So if you're training every day, you're putting the body through strain, you're going usually through a training that creates some sort of hypertrophy of muscle tissue, which is minor tears. It's not a rip. It's not like a pulled hammy. It's a minor tear. And to repair those minor tears, we need protein. So protein is made up of amino acids, and we need those amino acids from the protein to actually recover those little minor tears. It's like we've knocked the house over a little bit. We need bricks. We need bricks to repair that house, and protein are those bricks. So getting, if you're vegan, a good vegan supplement protein powder, or if you're not vegan, a good whey protein or even a collagen protein would be the baseline, the number one supplement for recovery for those elite athletes. Just sitting underneath those two are the amino acids glutamine and creatine. So when we're creating that environment for muscle tear, as I said, the protein and the bricks, glutamine is the man that lays those bricks. If we don't have glutamine, then we can't grab those amino acids and repair those hypertrophic tears as effectively. It's a non-essential amino acid, which doesn't mean it's not essential. It means that we can produce it a little bit. Essential amino acids we need to consume. We don't synthesize it in our body. Non-essentials, the body can synthesize. Now, glutamine is a non-essential, but we just don't synthesize enough for those high-level athletes. So we need to supplement with it. If we take glutamine in isolation, that means without a protein powder, it's not very effective for muscle recovery. It's great for gut health, gut lining. It'll build your immune system, can have a slight human growth hormone boosting effect, especially when taken with amino acids like arginine before bed. However, if we want it to repair muscle tissue, it needs the amino acids. It needs the bricks to do that at the same time. So we put glutamine in our protein, and all of a sudden we turbocharge that protein for muscle recovery. And what it means is people will notice they've got less DOMs or they're less sore the next day, which certainly doesn't mean they've trained less hard. It means that they've recovered. And that's going to increases chance of injury. If we keep training upon training and not repairing those micro tears, we've got a greater chance of injury. And it also means because we're less sore, we're going to be able to train harder, leading to greater adaptation. And like I said, ending up looking like a guy. So this is my favorite supplement in the world. Now second behind longevity ingredients, but glutamine is amazing because it also will help with regenerating gut lining, building immune system, etc., as well as brain health too. So all of that from a cheap, tasteless supplement. And then the other side of the pyramid is creatine. So it's the second most tried and tested and proven supplement in the world behind caffeine. A lot of people think creatine will just fill the muscle full of fluid and help increase what's called an hydraulic pressure, which is not the case. There's a few bits of science and biology behind the cycle, but in essence, it restores adenosine triphosphate in muscle tissue, ATP. So adenosine triphosphate is also abbreviated to ATP. And ATP is what breaks in the muscle and releases energy and allows us to make heavy to medium muscle contractions. So when, an AFL player is sprinting and kicking and tackling, he's using some ATP stores. When Guy is pushing hard on a run, at the end of a big triathlon, he's eating into his ATP stores. Creatine, by topping that ATP store up, means that they can push longer for harder, more reps at a heavier weight. Again, if we can do that, we're pushing harder than we could. And then it leads to better adaptation. So through training sessions, we can now go to that triathlon on a Sunday or a footy game and go faster and harder than we could. And then the glutamine and the creatine will help with the recovery so we can back it all up again. So that's how that trinity or that triangle will work together. Put them all together is when you'll start seeing amazing results. And that's why I actually got into supplementation, was when I started taking those three together, is when I put on the muscle, when I started pushing heavier weights, and they work so well that they're imperative for any high-level athlete.
So interesting, mate. So you talked about Leechy's background, which I'm not in any way familiar, and certainly him being...
He's a good guest.
Is not something that I can recall, because in the 1940s we didn't have TV, certainly not colour TV. So you must have read the newspaper avidly. Well done.
I'm a lot older than I look. That's
yeah. Well, Leechy's not. So here's the thing. So if I was to say, listen, when I was doing triathlon, and I was taking erythropoietin and then nandrolone, like in terms of those supplements, have you got a view on that?
Well, yes, performance enhancing supplements. You obviously weren't drug tested at the time.
So yeah, good point. Let's keep moving. So that's essentially our interest in the athletic performance, and I think Guy, you and I would both agree we're doing most of that. Certainly, creatine. Just on the creatine.
Creatine's really interesting, Carl, because only recently people have started talking about creatine more than just from that athletic point of view, but for brain health. Been coming out in the in socials and the like, and so that's an area, Paul, that creatine seems to be giving a better, a far greater advancement more than just the athletic ability side of things.
Sorry, Paul. There used to be, just on that, there used to be a loading phase. It was a take of 3 milligrams, and now we're seeing take 10, 15 milligrams a day. Can you give us a view on that?
Yeah. So really, as vessels, some are smaller, some are larger. And if we've got a lot of muscle tissue, we can hold a lot more creatine. Therefore, taking larger doses will work. If we're smaller, even a 50-kilo female athlete, they will need to take less because they have less muscle tissue to hold that adenosine triphosphate. However, we do want to space creatine intake. So if we're taking, say, 15 grams in the head, even a large athlete with a lot of muscle mass, the body can actually convert that to creatinine if it's overloading the kidneys. So if someone was to take those sort of 10, 15 gram serves, best to divide them up into 5-gram doses and have them as far apart as possible. And as far as loading phase goes, I'm still a really big fan of a loading phase. I've seen it work personally myself. We want to take 5 grams 4 times a day. So that's 20 grams for the first 5 days. And then we can maintain a really good creatine level with 1 teaspoon, just 5 grams per day. Now, we want to run that usually for a minimum of 6 weeks. And then however long we've had the creatine, we want to take a third of that time off. So if we're on it for 6 weeks, take 2 weeks off, and then we can start it again. If you want it for 3 months, that's fine too, but take a month off before restarting a creatine cycle. And it just gives the kidneys a little bit of a rest so that we can, when we take the creatine again, we're not over adapted to it and we can still get those really great effects. However, we can take 5 grams a day forever, and that is still fantastic too. Sorry, Carl. Yeah.
So, Paul, the question is, when you have that time off and you come back to your cycle, do you then need to load again, or do you go straight back into 5 a day?
I would recommend loading again. The way that the muscles store ATP from creatine intake is like a water tank. And if that tank is empty, so you've had that time off, you're going to have to load it back up to the top. So the first 20 grams over the first day gets it to here, then the second day gets it higher, all the way to the top to the 5th day. And then when we use our creatine stores for the day, 1 teaspoon will get us back to the top, so back to saturation levels again, so we can maintain as much ATP in muscle tissue to maintain as much performance as we can get from that awesome supplement.
Brilliant. Leechy, I know you've experimented with creatine. Have you noticed a difference yourself?
I certainly noticed it when I used to take it back in the days lifting weights. I found that that there was benefit there and the recovery was good. And the other thing, which you know, Paul, is that you feel bigger, don't you? When you're on creatine, just that sort of the muscles feel like they're larger, and that would be due to the fluid in the muscles that sort of feel like you're built up. But certainly from an energy point of view, I did notice a fair bit, and I do take creatine probably around that sort of just that maintenance amount a day. I don't load, but I certainly just take it on that maintenance basis. Yeah.
It's really important that you do take it every day then on maintenance dose, because if you do miss a day, you'll never really get it back until you reload it again. And then if you've been taking maintenance for a long period of time, you might be loaded anyway. So even on days that you don't train, you do take it. And it's good that you mentioned that you notice the muscles were more full. That's because to hold ATP in muscle tissue, it does take a lot of water. So the muscles will swell with water. That's not what we're actually going for. We want the ATP, but ATP needs water to be held in suspension to be actually utilized by the muscle tissue. So that is noticed, and people feel a nice muscle pump and swell because creatine
What's the brain health benefits? Can you explain that?
Not really. I don't have a full handle on that, to be honest. I know that ATP, being an energy system, can help with all, not just muscle, but all functions. And that can include the brain. But there is new science coming out all the time. There might be something I haven't actually researched that's causing that effect from creatine, other than the ATP. And if there is, I'm not too sure about that.
So that leads into this one. So longevity is the talking point at the moment, and there's a lot of noise out there. I know that you're very good at explaining what longevity is in a very basic and simple way. So I'd be keen for you to do that. And then we want to go into what products are beneficial from that longevity point of view and which ones aren't.
Longevity isn't just living a long life. It's having healthy cells that, like I said, are healthy. And so you don't have age-related decline. So that's what longevity is. It's reducing age-related decline. How do we age? It's based on DNA. So we all know what a DNA helix looks like. It's got the chromosomes that join those swirling lines on the outside. I'm trying to explain it in words rather than draw it. But we all
you drew it for me last time. I did.
It makes life a lot easier when you can draw it. We all know what it looks like. Why do we age? Well, every time a cell goes through senescence, which is cell death, and produces a new cell to replace it, the DNA is the blueprint on how that cell replicates. So it's all the DNA is architectural and mechanical information. It's data. DNA is data. And what happens is every time that cell reproduces, the DNA in that cell before it reproduces doubles in length, moves into the new cell, so splits in half, moves into the new cell, the old cell dies, and then the new cell has the DNA. But that DNA end, which is called a telomere, gets deleted every time that occurs. So eventually that DNA, as those cells are reproducing, and we roughly reproduce cells between 8 and 14 times per year, but that can decrease or increase based on stress and genetics. But every time that occurs, the telomere gets deleted, the chromosomal data in between, so those horizontal lines disappear, and eventually that DNA has less data. So let's talk about a skin cell on the eye. It reproduces for 30 years. Eventually, that DNA is now shorter. It doesn't have the information to assimilate and synthesize as much collagen and elastin, and then we start getting wrinkles or crow's feet. That doesn't just happen on the skin on our face, for example. That happens in every cell in the human body. The DNA decreases. Eventually, it's like taking a photocopy of a photocopy. The first time it's nice and white. Eventually, 100 photocopies, it's black and scratchy. Same thing with our cells. Now, if we can find a way to stop those DNA strands from shortening, technically, we can halt aging because we're containing the data on how that cell is supposed to be. And if we can lengthen it to a longer length, like when we were 18 years of age, we can technically age backwards. That's the current cutting edge science. If we can grow DNA, we can age backwards. And that really is the essence of longevity. And that's what longevity supplementation is trying to achieve, the lengthening of DNA.
So that's the holy grail. So the Brian Johnsons that's spending millions of dollars a year to slow down the aging process, do exactly what you're talking about with trying to turn it around and go the opposite way. What are some of the things that we can all do in our day-to-day life, and what can we take to enhance exactly what you're talking about?
So practical measures would be, and some of these are easier said than done, but reduce stress. So stress will multiply and can multiply senescence and cell reproduction, as well as damage DNA. And so stress, we definitely want to reduce stress if we can. Plenty of water to get the toxins out of our system, because toxicity can also damage and shorten DNA. So lots of water, reduce stress, healthy 8 hours of sleep, getting to bed at 10 o'clock, waking up, at least having 8 hours in bed, 9 hours ideally. helping the brain clear out a lot of muck, which can then lead to less stress in the body, etc. So it's really it's a lot about stress, and living healthily, eating healthily, reducing toxins, etc. As far as supplementation goes, the big supplement that Ben Greenfield, Brian Johnson, and the founder of longevity, Dr. David Sinclair, an Australian Harvard scientist, nicotinamide mononucleotide, or NMN. So that's the one that's had the biggest rap. That's the one that Dr. David Sinclair talks about all the time. It's been shown to be the precursor to the golden nucleotide, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NAD. And that is the ingredient that fuels what's called a sirtuin enzyme that will regrow DNA. So people would say, well, why don't I take NAD then? Well, NAD is quite a large molecule. It's not well absorbed orally, sublingually, or through the gastrointestinal tract. So to get a good amount of NAD in the blood, it's best to inject it into the bloodstream, and drip it in slowly. And that's not practical. It's not comfortable. It feels terrible. I've done it a few times. You feel like you're going to die. It's quite an unusual feeling. You get a heaviness on your chest, really hot, quite tingly, and an impending sense of doom, which I was warned about, but never thought that I would experience until you do it. But you can't walk around with a drip in your arm all day. So how do you do it? You get it from its precursor, NMN, or NR is the other precursor, which will lead to large amounts of this NAD in the blood. And that is what's fueling the sirtuin enzyme to repair DNA. Now, we can go a little bit deeper if you'd like to. The first longevity ingredient, it actually was found out by Dr. David Sinclair 25 to 30 years ago, was resveratrol from red grapes. And that's where red wine got a good rap from. He discovered this ingredient that protected telomeres from degradation. So it didn't reverse aging, it didn't regrow DNA. It stopped its degradation in times of senescence and cell reproduction. And so that was a great start. We could pause it, but then he said, well, there might be something here. Let's go down the rabbit hole. Can we reverse it? How did it pause it? Well, this resveratrol in red grapes, it can be found in other ingredients like Japanese knotweed, etc. It would activate an enzyme or a host of enzymes called sirtuins. Now, sirtuins are our hero enzymes. They protect our DNA from degradation. Typically, they get activated naturally in times of stress. So at the moment, with long-term clinical studies, the only thing clinically shown with a long-term clinical study to prolong life is fasting. So we know that it's clinically shown can prolong life by up to 30%. How could restricting food prolong life? It doesn't make sense. It was because it activated our sirtuin enzymes, which said, look, we're in a state of stress. We don't have food. So we're going to start unraveling here. We need to save our DNA, our blueprint, so we don't die. So this sirtuin protected the DNA and stopped it from aging, and resveratrol activated it as well. So fasting activates it, resveratrol activates it. High quality olive oil will also activate it, because when we're in starvation, the body releases a lot of oleic acid naturally from our fat stores. High quality extra virgin olive oil is high in oleic acid, so it tricks the body into thinking it's starving when we actually have olive oil, and it can also turn on these sirtuin enzymes. So we're stopping it from degrading. As Dr. David Sinclair went down the rabbit hole, he found that NAD, when that enzyme was activated, would regrow DNA. So it not just protected its degradation, it regrew DNA, refilled in chromosomal data, and could regrow. The issue with that is it burns through our methyl group. So when people are taking NMN, and ideally they're taking it with something that's going to signal autophagy like resveratrol. So you take NMN and resveratrol together, keep putting methyl groups in, like activated B vitamins or some sort of methylated glycine like betaine, etc., to keep adding those methyl groups to actually keep that DNA reparation process going. And if we can put all those three together, technically we can reverse aging, and it's a very exciting time for longevity right now.
That's great. You mentioned fasting, and we've talked about fasting before. Leechy and I have experimented with a variety of things. When you say fasting, are we talking about a 14, 16, 18-hour fast to inspire autophagy, as you mentioned, or are we talking about day-long fasts or 3 days? What's your thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because the odd expert will argue and say, look, autophagy won't occur unless someone's fasting for 3 or 4 days. However, the studies were done on people that weren't fasting for long periods, but had a short eating window, and that showed the increase in lifespan. They would do the, not eating on Fridays for religious reasons, etc., as well, which obviously gives them a bigger non-eating window. But we could see, based on the data, that just intermittent fasting was effective. However, we also know for the body to start clearing out bad cells, etc., then we might need a longer period. But the autophagy, for as far as getting DNA from stopping to degrade, could be activated with intermittent fasting and didn't necessarily need really long fasting windows like 3 to 4 days.
So is that when you start talking about what is that minimum time to do that with intermittent fasting, is that, would you say 14 hours or 15 hours? Just so people understand, what is the bare minimum that you would do to get some benefit?
So it's different between sexes. So guys will need a longer non-eating window, and based on our hormones and our makeup, we're more effective at not having things go wrong with longer deficit windows. So for a guy, 6 to 8 hours of eating and then 16 to 18 hours of not eating is a really good window. So for a male, a lot of people will do the 11 till 7 o'clock, which actually, when you look at it, is not too difficult. And then you can push it to, say, 12 to 6 o'clock if you wanted to go a little bit tighter. For females, we push that out 2 hours. So theirs is a 14 to a 16-hour non-eating window, or a 10 to 8-hour eating window. Now, based on female dominant hormones, estrogenic hormones, longer fasting windows can have a negative impact on those female hormones. So sometimes they're fine, but they just need to monitor that, especially if they're doing it on a semi-permanent basis, to make sure they're not throwing their hormones into disarray. But yeah, roughly 6 to 8 hours eating for a guy, 8 to 10 hours eating for a female, and that's enough to elicit that fasting response.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note too is that when you first mentioned about longevity and the fact that causing a speeding of the aging process is stress. There's a difference between that stress, being worried about things and putting undue pressure on yourself, as opposed to the stress of not eating and intermittent fasting with the body and stressing through that situation is a different thing.
That is called a hormetic stress, and that's an external stressor. So other examples of that would be sauna, going into extreme heat, or ice baths, going into extreme cold. It'll elicit the turning on of these hero enzymes, because if we were in an ice bath for an hour at 0 degrees, we would likely die. So the body says we need to protect our DNA, and likewise with a sauna when it's hot. So these healthy external stresses can turn on protective pathways in the body. If we do them too long, then it becomes an issue. Yeah. So everything in the right amount of time and moderation can have a.
Can you let everyone know? Because Paul, I heard that when you're in the shower, you do your cold in the shower, the cold shower. What length do you go to put yourself under pressure? Could you just explain that?
It might be a little bit too stressful, so I'll run to the gym because I'm quite busy. So I'll run to the gym to warm up, and I'll train a heavy weight session, and then I'll do my sprint training on the way home, and then I will kneel on my hard tile floors. That's not got a hormetic stress, but that's putting the mind under a lot of uncomfortability to help with mind strength. And then I'll do my Wim Hof breathing under a cold shower all at the same time, just to stack it all together. It's a lot, but it gets done in a short amount of time.
Love it. It's amazing. So, Paul, I mentioned earlier we've got a couple of things to talk about and then get into a little bit of a test for you. And we've gone everywhere from things that you and I can relate to based on that story in my athletic past, which is obviously the athlete's aspect of this conversation, into longevity and aging, which is very central to Leechy's experience currently. But if we move into the quiz, okay? So here's the quiz. You mentioned Dr. Sinclair, who, if anyone that's into longevity generally knows, David Sinclair's been around there as the forefather. He's got a couple of critics. Brad Stanfield, New Zealand doctor, has a lot to say about him. Whether he says it for a commercial sales benefit or not, who can say? But he's created his own microvitamins. Now, here's a quiz. I'm not going to read you everything in here, but I'd be interested to know from your perspective what everyone should be taking. And this is the last aspect of this conversation before the actual test. But every person in the world, or sorry, in Australia at least, given our lifestyle, what's your recommendation for the every person?
So the first one would be fish oil. So getting some sort of omega-3 into the body. We've adapted and evolved through typically eating fish in our diet. We just don't get that anymore. If we do, it's typically farmed, so it's not actually high in omega-3s. And in some cases, if they're farmed and grain-fed, it's higher in omega-6. Now, omega-6 isn't necessarily a bad thing until we mess up our required ratios. So through adaptation, we're required to have 3 parts omega-3 to 1 part omega-6. Through current diet, sunflower oils, canola oils, even foods with a 5-star rating that have vegetable oil, they're high in omega-6. Now, our ratios have been thrown 3 parts 3 to 1 part 6 to now 1 part 3, 20 part 6. It's a 60 times multiple shift. Why is that an issue? Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. It actually switches off cytokine production on the COX-2 receptors that sit on top of our kidneys, and cytokines will promote inflammation. Now, we're not saying inflammation is necessarily a bad thing. We want inflammation after a gym session. That causes a lot of blood flow to an area, can create a lot of nutrients to go to an area and create healing. But if we're chronically inflamed all the time, that's actually causing damage to our major organs and arteries and putting the body under undue amounts of stress. We want to be able to get inflamed, get the inflammation to fix whatever issue it was designed to fix, and then come out of that inflammation. And with our current ratios of omega-6 to 3, we're chronically inflamed. So by reducing our intake of omega-6s, vegetable oils, specifically sunflower oil and canola oil, which we're told we're healthy, in large amounts, they're not healthy, and increase our omega-3s, we're balancing that ratio to normalize our inflammation, anti-inflammation processes. And that is probably the number one thing that people should be taking. The other one that I would go for would be magnesium. So we have enough calcium in our diet. Now, calcium causes things to contract. So, for example, if a muscle starts going into spasm, the calcium synapse connection is created, and then eventually it'll cramp if we don't have magnesium to break that calcium synapse connection. So magnesium goes in, breaks that calcium connection, stops that calcium from activating that synapse, and can allow the muscle to relax again. Also, for blood pressure, if we've got too much calcium entering our blood vessels and activating those receptors, the blood vessels will constrict and increase our blood pressure. Magnesium will reduce blood pressure and allow those blood vessels to expand. And so if we don't get enough magnesium and we don't in our diet anymore, all these issues, 350 plus enzymatic reactions and a whole lot of other bodily reactions can occur. So straight up, omega-3s and magnesiums would be my first 2 go-tos. People will be less sore, their brain health would be better with the omega-3s, and then the magnesium would help them be a lot more relaxed, less tight muscles, and when taken before bed will help them sleep better, which is also very, very important. So I know I've gone into a lot of detail on 2 ingredients. Is that sort of what you were looking for, Carl, or were you looking for more?
No, I think anything in terms of a generalized recommendation for the every person is gold, because we all have, most of us have similarity or commonality in our lifestyle and what it is that we do and what it is that we eat. I think some of your comments there speak to that.
You talked about NMN and resveratrol. Is there anything else out there that people need to know about that is worthwhile to have a look at?
Yeah, so there's the pathway. Like I said, we want NAD in the blood. The pathway works with starting with vitamin B3, which is nicotinamide or niacin. That'll get used in a lot of different bodily functions, and then some of that will convert to NR or nicotinamide riboside. Again, used in other functions, convert to then NMN, and then that finally converts to NAD. We're finding that with B3 administration, there isn't a lot of NAD production. So wipe that off the board. It's great for a whole lot of other things, energy levels, etc., but not that great to convert to final levels of NAD. NR and NMN are both very good to converting to NAD. By orally administrating these, we'll get larger amounts of NAD in the blood. So we should introduce NR as another precursor to NAD. So it's not just NMN, NR is very effective as well. When we're talking about resveratrol, you do need to take it with fats, and it's less effective than trans resveratrol. So I'd like people to see if they can switch over to trans resveratrol. That would be a lot more effective at activating those search for enzymes. And then, as I mentioned before, taking some methyl donor to complete the process is really important. So whether that's an activated B vitamin, you can get a lot of methyl groups from bone broth is effective, or betaine is good too. And then the other side of aging is mitochondrial death, dormancy and decline. The mitochondria are the energy systems or energy rooms of every one of our cells. By the age of 40% of our mitochondria are dead or dormant. And by the age of 90, if we're lucky enough to get there, 90% are dead or dormant. If we can rebirth, revitalize, and create new mitochondria, that's really effective at anti-aging on a different pathway than DNA degeneration. So a good CoQ10, you can get different forms. It's best to go to the final form, which is ubiquinol. Some people can't convert the earlier forms. So some people can, some people can't. So everyone might as well just go to ubiquinol. And then PQQ is being found not just to rebirth and revitalize dead and dormant mitochondria, but create mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria. So, if we can get those first few supplements like NR, NMN, transresveratrol, and a methyl donor like activated Bs or betaine, great. And then ubiquinol with PQQ, amazing for mitochondrial function. Put them together, longevity.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Great summary, Paul. For bonus points, I'm going to talk to you about a particular supplement, and you're going to tell me why I would be taking it.
Why, really?
Why I'm taking the supplement. You ready to go?
All right. I'm ready for the test.
Milk thistle.
Sure. So milk thistle is a herb used for liver. It's great for liver detoxification as well as regeneration. Now, the great thing about the liver, it's the only organ, or readily known only organ, to be able to regenerate. So milk thistle can help with the regeneration of liver cells as well as helping with detoxification. And a sluggish liver can lead to a whole lot of issues. If we don't have a liver, we die very quickly. So really important to have a healthy liver, helps with digestion, energy levels, a whole lot of hormone productions, etc. So you're taking milk thistle for liver health.
And do you think there's any correlation between the comments around nandrolone and the liver health?
Well, if you're telling the truth about nandrolone, absolutely. I would also recommend looking at TUDCA. That is a liver powerhouse. So anyone on things like nandrolone or
Stanozol, dianabol. Yep.
Yes. They all need to be on a milk thistle and ideally TUDCA. And that can at least maintain some sort of liver health integrity.
You should tell Paul, Carlos, why you're actually asking the questions on the liver.
Yeah, true. For my own professional integrity, to set the record straight, I've never taken steroids or performance-enhancing drugs that I've known of, but I have fatty liver disease as a hereditary precursor. So it's something that I've got lean, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Don't drink, never have, and the progression, the prognosis for us at lean, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is worse than alcoholic fatty liver disease and just general obese-based fatty liver disease.
Yes. Yeah. So if you really want to turbocharge that, you'll notice a big improvement that take TUDCA as well. There are products that will combine milk thistle with TUDCA and other cofactors to help with liver health these days.
Brilliant. Well, that's an incredible podcast. I think, Leechy, you have to say that's one of our best.
Yep, no, it is. I knew he'd be spot on, and he is my supplement king, and I listen to everything he has to tell me.
Yeah.
And the program I'm on is based on Paul's knowledge. Yes.
Wow. Well, he said things. He told us a lot of truths, and then he made some things up about you and your past. But on the whole, incredibly valuable for our listener.
I made sure I got on early and briefed him exactly what he needed to say about me for this podcast.
I'll give you my BSB and account number later, Guy. You can just send it.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us on the show. There's no doubt you'll be back on. I don't know when, I don't know why, but I'm sure I certainly would love to have you back on the program, and as would our listeners.
Thanks, guys.